Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
All right, welcome back to Ducks and Pucks. Last week we did a couple shows for you guys, and we had Phil Hewitt on our show. And this week we have a couple more guests. We have obviously Eddie and myself, and two other writers, Alex and Thomas, that have helped us out along the couple years that we've been doing the podcast and blog. And we're going to get to some of the Ducks news. Not too much that happened in the last week. We'll discuss, though, Hagelin. We'll talk a little bit about the Scoreboard being redone and the jersey coming out hopefully in October. We'll find out what it really is, and a little bit of NHL news. But first, the big news this week, which we were hoping we would hear, Eddie, and it happened, was Hagelin was signed, and the deal was right on the money of what you said, 4 years and $4 million each year.
Yeah, I really couldn't have seen him getting much more than that. I mean, we all pretty much thought he'd get around the same deal that Silfverberg got, and I think they liked the 4-year term that they gave Silfverberg. And when we were discussing a couple podcasts ago on how much we think he'd get, and between 3.75 and 4.25 was what we expected. And obviously he signed for $4 million over 4 years. So I mean, it's a good deal. I like it. It leaves room. He definitely has a lot of potential and could prove a really good deal down the road.
Yeah, exactly. And what we put out there too with the release was a fan poll, about what line he should play on, and the fans, almost 70% of you said that he should be on the second line. And what are your thoughts on that, Thomas? Do you think that Hagelin should go on the second line next season, or maybe try him out on a different one? What do you think?
Knowing Bruce Boudreau, he's going to end up on every line at some point, but I think the plan is for him to start on that second line next to Kessler and Silfverberg and just see how they gel. Those three have a lot of speed, and they can create a lot of offense. If he doesn't work out there, I think the second likely place for him is on the third line next to Rakell and Cogliano. Because he's so defensively responsible, he and Cogliano could really just do a great job of being a great, really fast speed checking line, and I think he'd fit really well on one of those two lines.
And Alex, what are your thoughts? Second line, third line, maybe throw him on the first line. What do you think?
Honestly, I'd really like to see him on the first line because I think that'd be a very interesting dynamic with obviously Getz and Perry's there. But it would be really good to see him on the third line. That's my preferred choice, as much as the first one intrigues me. Because you look at Rakell, he actually is very defensively responsible, especially for a rookie. I mean, was he -2 in the playoffs last year, and he had 1 goal, and that was his only point. So obviously, I mean, against Chicago, he held his ground. Cogliano, great defensive forward there, a lot of speed. I think Hagelin would fit in well there as kind of maybe a redo of that Paulson, Moen, and Niedermeyer line from 2007. So, but with a lot more youth and a little bit more speed. So it'd be interesting to see him there, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's going to be the thing. I think you're both right. Boudreau is always going to mix up the lines, and we're going to probably see him on a few lines. So he may, end up on the first, second, and third for different, stints in the beginning of the season until he finally finds a home. One of the fans asked us a question, Wayne. He asked us with Hagelin's speed, does he think it'll help take the Ducks to the next level, and what impact do you think he'll have next season? And Eddie, what do you think in terms of speed? Do you think that's another addition that the Ducks are going to need to go, farther in the playoffs?
Yeah, I don't think obviously he's a quick player and he's one of the fastest in the league, but I mean, we already had Edom, who was a quick player too, and I don't think it adds a ton of difference in the speed we have in our lineup. Obviously, it's a big advantage, and to put him on a line with Kessler and Silfverberg is going to be great. But I think the real big advantage comes on the penalty kill. He's a really defensively responsible forward. He played on the PK in New York, and I think that's going to be a big help. Putting him on maybe one unit and Cogliano on the other. There's a lot of potential for some short-handed goals, but I think he'll fit well on the penalty kill.
Yeah, I think that you're right on that. I mean, he's going to be an addition that's going to help not only on even strength but on the special teams. And Murray had talked about him as being a wild card, and there's going to be some options that are going to be there for him next season. It's going to definitely make the other teams think about, hey, first line, second line, or possibly third line. I think it's going to be difficult for teams to concentrate on one specific line. That seems to be the biggest thing to me, Thomas, is having options on the top lines and the speed. What are your take on Hagelin for next season?
Yeah, I agree. His speed is just phenomenal. He probably is now the fastest player in the lineup. It's either him or Cogliano, and that just can add a new dimension to the team. Edom had a lot of speed, but he unfortunately has not learned to use it as effectively as we hoped he would. Whereas Hagelin's at the point where he knows how to use his speed to beat players, to lose pucks, to get open, and to get chances on net, and also to use it to help on the back check defensively. So his speed is going to add a lot to the team. In terms of pushing us further in the playoffs, it'll depend, I think, upon who we face. When we faced the Hawks last year, there's a reason why the Ducks brought in T-Catch, because the lineup needed more speed, and Hagelin's just going to add to that. So I think if we face a team like Chicago, a really fast, skilled team, a player like Hagelin could make a big difference in that series.
Yeah, I think you're right. That was an issue against Chicago, and speed is definitely going to be something that's going to help the Ducks. Another kind of aspect to this too is trying to compare Hagelin to Bolesky in terms of the numbers and whatnot. We all know the numbers that Bolesky put up last year. But what do you think, Alex, in terms of Hagelin replacing Bolesky? That was kind of the second part of Wayne's question.
Well, I think he's definitely got a good chance at it. But even if he doesn't specifically replace Bolesky, Chris Stewart can always, replace Bolesky. He has a very similar style of play. He's just a right-handed shot as opposed to a lefty. So, yeah, Hagelin definitely will have his chance. But, if it doesn't work out, you always have Stewart there to replace him too. So, regardless of the case, Hagelin still really helps. But I think one thing that really just can not be ignored here is just how much experience Hagelin has in the playoffs. I mean, he went to the Stanley Cup Finals with the Rangers. He went deep this year. He knows how to play in those big games. We saw him score that big goal against the Penguins to finish the series there. So I'm excited to see what he can bring in the postseason as well.
You bring up a good point too, Alex. Is the veteran leadership is something that Murray talked about in his interview with Hazy too. And so bringing in these other players, Bieksa, Horkoff, Stewart, guys that have been in battles like that, I think is going to be a huge addition. It's probably that off ice thing, Eddie, that we talked about with Phil. The Ducks trying to get over this hump. Winning these game sevens and getting, past these quality teams in a 7-game series. I think this is one of those intangible things, Eddie, that the Ducks will welcome and need, and will push them farther next year.
Yeah, most of the pressure fell on Boschman to be that veteran leader guy, and obviously Getzlaf and Perry as well. But bringing in guys like Bieksa, he's gone to the Stanley Cup Final with Vancouver, and then you bring in Horkoff, who's a veteran leader as well, and just bringing in all these types of guys who can spur the young guys on and teach them the ways, and it's I think it's good. I think you need these types of guys in the lineup, but the real good thing is as well is that they can still play. BX is still a top 4 defenseman. Horkoff can play a third line, fourth line center role really well. So I think when you have that mix, it's definitely good.
That kind of brings us up to another fan question too. Is Jake asked us who's going to wear the the alternate captain next season. Obviously, Boschman's gone and went to Colorado. Did an informal poll question on Twitter, and I'm going to have one actually on the blog later, hopefully tonight. But there's a lot of names that have been thrown out there in terms of players that should wear that A, and BX has been one of them. Kessler's been one. Horkoff, Fowler, Lindholm. There's been a lot of names thrown out there. The front runner, probably from what the fans I've heard, and we'll see if the poll holds true, is probably Kessler. But Thomas, what do you think in terms of players wearing the A next year? Obviously you have Perry wearing one, but who do you think will wear the other one?
I think Kessler's the odds-on favorite. If I remember correctly, last year when Perry and Boschman were out, he was the first player to wear the A, and if both of them were out, Cogliano was the other. So I think Kessler's the favorite, with Cogliano being the second choice. However, it wouldn't shock me if the Ducks prefer to have one defenseman wear it, and in that case, I think it would go to either Fowler or Bieksa.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the sticking point, is whether or not they're going to go with another forward center or if they're going to go to defensive men. So what do you think, Alex? Do you think if they go with a defensive man, it would be, Bieksa, Fowler, maybe Lindholm, or do you think they stick with another forward?
I think the practical choice would be to go Kessler. I mean, with all that leadership and experience and reliability. But yeah, if you want to anchor the blue line, honestly, my pick would be Cam Fowler. Generally, generally speaking, in the NHL, GMs and coaches coaches specifically do not have like a really good track record of putting A's on guys who are brand new to the team. So that would be my only reason why I wouldn't choose Bieksa there. Obviously, with Kessler, he had the opportunity to get the A last year. They chose to give it to Perry, who had long time been the cycle A, with Solani and Koivu wearing the alternates at that time. So yeah, I got to go Kessler on this one.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point, and Eddie, you can kind of talk to us a little bit about. I put on some of the names of some of the players on the poll question that they haven't even been on the Ducks. Horkoff and Bieksa, but I think that's kind of the trend is that usually the coaches aren't going to put a player with an A that hasn't been on the team for the season. But they did have Kessler wear it in the preseason last year, so it's going to be interesting. Maybe it would be someone that's been on the team last year, or what do you think? A newcomer?
I think everybody's been saying it, and I just got to say the same thing. I think Kessler definitely is the guy you would expect, but it's always nice though to have this many options. I mean, there's a lot of guys who are leaders in the room and that we think could step up and wear the A, and even if guys aren't, like, even if Kessler gets it, but BX is still a leader, and even without the A, he's going to be the leader in the locker room. Horkoff's the same way. Cogliano, Fowler, these guys are going to lead even without the A. So I think in the end, it just comes down to who gets it. But there's going to be a lot of guys leading in that locker room.
Yeah, and I think that's really the key this season that the Ducks are going to fix going into next year is the veteran leadership in the locker room. And whoever gets the A, I mean, we'll put out the poll question, and obviously it's fun because we like to get the fan interaction, see what everybody thinks and who the favorite is. I think it really isn't going to matter. I just don't. I think the key is going to be, like we've all talked about, there's several players on this team that have been on the team that are going to be leaders. There's going to be new guys that are going to come in and be leaders. And Eddie, I really think that hopefully is going to be what gets us that one more win to go to the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely going to help, and improving the team as well. Bringing in Hagelin, and Sekach will have a second season with the Ducks, Stewart and BX on the blue line, and bringing in Kudobin as a backup as well. I think all these improve the team and just bring us that next step forward, and hopefully we can win that next game and get to the Stanley Cup final. And I think from there on, I think we could definitely beat any team from the East.
Yeah, Eddie, you mentioned Hudobin, who came into the Ducks now, and it sounds like he's going to be the backup. But the goalie situation is something interesting for the Ducks now. You've got Gibson, Anderson, and Hudobin. When you're looking at these three, how do you think it's going to pan out next season, Eddie?
Yeah, we discussed this before too, and the fact that Gibson is still on a two-way, it makes it more likely that he'll probably start with the goals, and the fact that Anderson and Khudobin can't be sent down without going through waivers. Well, that's a little bit obvious. I don't think you'd want to start with all three guys in the NHL. So, and I think we all agree that Anderson would be the starter. So I think it's good for his development. I'd like to see Gibson play almost a full season in the AHL. It always takes goalies a little bit longer to develop, and they usually start in the NHL at a little bit older age than some of the players do. So I think it's good for all goalies if Gibson stays down and Anderson starts, and Khudobin will definitely challenge Anderson for that starting role.
Yeah, you mentioned the challenging part, and that's what Murray said in his last interview too. Is he said Hudobin's coming in with the mindset that he wants to be the starter and he wants to challenge Anderson. What do you think, Thomas? Do you think that he'll be able to challenge Anderson, or do you think it's more of a he's gonna maybe motivate Anderson and to just make Anderson that much better as a number one starter?
I'm hoping he's just going to motivate Anderson to being a better player. But if memory serves correctly, when he was in Carolina, there were times he was pushing Cam Ward for that starting position. So he definitely has the talent to do so. And I mean, hey, if he's good enough to be that starter and takes over from Anderson, then he's good enough to be the starter. Anderson, I love what he did last season, but he's still a very young goalie. He's only in his third professional season, second as a starter. So it's not a guarantee he can maintain that level of play, but I hope he's able to.
And Alex, what do you think? You think Anderson will, maintain that level and be the starter, or do you think the Ducks might switch it up and there may be a battle between Hudobin and him for that spot?
I think Anderson's definitely not going to play 54 games like last year. I would be surprised if it was more than 48, maybe. Try to take it down a notch. Anderson played well, but that 9.14 save percentage, I mean, that's pretty much league average. It's not I mean, granted, he will have more experience this season, so I mean, you're gonna have to judge it right out of the gate. But one thing that I like about Khudobin is Khudobin's history. I mean, obviously, if you look at his stats last year with that disastrous Carolina team, I mean, pretty much everybody was negative on that team. But if you go back a season before that to 13-14, he actually had 36 games with Carolina, in which he had a 9.26 save and a 2.3 goals against. So obviously, that's incredible numbers. Before that, he had 14 games with Boston, .92. So not a big sample size, but if he can actually generate that with a better team, especially with the Ducks being a better team than Carolina for sure, he'll definitely be at least a solid backup, be able to relieve some pressure. You won't have to roll Anderson every night. But one thing I do like about his signing is it's still better than LaBarbera and Brizgalov. So, you have Gibson coming up to replace if we have injury issues. Last year, with Dwayne Rollison donning the pads for a backup. I mean,
Yeah.
we had some problems there. So at least Gibson, he'll be a good third option. Khudobin, I would still say he's the second, and Anderson I still think will be the starter.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about keeping Anderson fresh, basically. And we saw that with the Ducks at the end of the season last year, Eddie, when we started resting some players. Kessler sat out one game. We saw them rotate the defensive players and give certain guys time off. I think Alex really, made a good point there that Anderson will play and be number one, but he may not play just as many games because one of the criticisms that some of the fans gave him was the way he played towards the end of the Blackhawks series. They said that he looked a little worn out. Obviously, numbers don't lie. He gave up a lot of goals, but it's not just his fault too. But what do you think, Eddie, in terms of trying to keep him fresh the whole year?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There's not a lot of goalies out there who can play 60, 70 games in a season, and especially like you said, only being 3 seasons in so far into his NHL career, it's hard to put that much pressure on a guy. So I think having a capable backup who can push him for the starter job and split those starts with him is definitely going to benefit his his success and keep him fresh, like you said. So. I think that's definitely gonna help out, and we'll be able to see him hopefully continue his success into the playoffs with a little bit more rest.
That brings us to looking at the lineup in total now. We're pretty sure that Hagelin's the last move of the summer for the Ducks. I haven't heard anything else, and I don't think they're going to do anything else. But we'll just go with what we have now. We talked about the lineups before, and trying to figure out who's going to go where. So the Ducks get in Hagelin. If they put in Hagelin, and then obviously we re-sign Silfverberg too, 4 years being the type of deals that are being given out. It looks like both of them and Kessler will be on the second line, maybe after some tinkering in the beginning. But, how would it go with the other lines? I'll start with Eddie on this one. What do you think? If that second line stays the way it is, how do you think the other three might pan out?
Well, I think, obviously Getzlaf Perry, that's a given on the first line, and then it all depends on who they want to put up there. And if you have Hagelin slotted in on that second line with Kessler and Silfverberg, you look at some guys who could go up there. Sakic has spent a little bit of time up there. I think Maroon's the guy we'd all expect if they're going to go with what they had last year. Also Cogliano can play up there. Stewart, even though he's a right wing, you could always give him a shot up there, but I think realistically they'll start the season with Maroon unless they see something from a guy like Sakic or Cogliano and want to put him up there, and then you would expect to see Cogliano and Rakell on that third line. And you could maybe Stewart, or you could play Sakic on the right wing, and then you would like to see since Thompson's out, Horkoff on that fourth line. Possibly any of Cogliano or Sakic if they're going to play them all on left wing, and then it comes down to if you want to play Jackman or Wagner on that's the fourth line right wing, and I think that's really the only big question of which one of those guys is going to play.
Yeah, and you mentioned Wagner, which is kind of an interesting situation. For those of you that know, Thomas writes a lot about the prospects on our website and does a really great job keeping up on them, because I honestly don't have the time to do it, and I'm glad he does. But the Wagner situation is a little bit precarious, Thomas, and it's going to kind of you can go into depth of the issue of his contract, but also how it's going to affect those third and fourth lines for the Ducks.
So when the Ducks re-signed Wagner to a one-year deal back in July, because of his age being 24 and because of the number of years he's been playing professional hockey since he signed his entry-level contract, which is 3, he now has to pass through waivers to be sent to San Diego. So if the Ducks choose to, he can start the season off with the goals. I don't know the exact number of days, but I think Alex said it was 12 days before the start of the season. They can assign him there without waivers. After that, though, he will have to pass through waivers. And I mean, he's not a great scorer or anything, but he's a good, young, cheap player who's going to give you a good effort on a fourth line. So there's a very good chance teams will claim him if he is put on waivers at any point during the season. And being such a good young asset, the Ducks probably don't want to lose him for what would literally be nothing. So they're going to have to make a choice. They either want him to start the season in San Diego and be one of the call-ups, but if he is an injury call-up, he'll probably stay the season with the Ducks. Or what I think that I hope happens is during training camp and preseason, he shows that he's ready to be with the Ducks on a full-time basis this season. That's my hope for him, but because the Ducks have so many players on their roster already, it wouldn't shock me if they want him to start in San Diego and just see how he progresses down there. And if he plays like he did last year, if memory serves me correct, in his first game of the season with Norfolk, he had a hat trick to start the season off, and that's why he was called up for the fourth or fifth game of the season to make his NHL debut. So for Wagner, if he tears the AHL up like he did last year, I think he'll be called up and stay with the team the entire year. But just depends, I think, how he does early in the season and in training camp.
Yeah, and you make some very good points there. I mean, how is it going to pan out in the beginning? I think it's kind of a wait and see approach. Going into the preseason, like you said, and Alex mentioned the 12-day mark. So it'll be interesting to see if he does stay down there because they're going to have to make some kind of a decision. What do you think, Alex? You think Wagner stays down, and then the fourth line is, maybe Jackman on there with Stewart or some kind of other combination? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think Nick Cardillis and Stefan Nason are going to get some time, definitely in camp, to show what they can do as well. So I think that's really going to be a battle of who wins that of the 3, including Wagner. And the best, I think, will stay with the Ducks. And, if it turns out Wagner isn't the best option right now, maybe after camp you send him down. You keep Cardillis or Nason up for depth. You can always send those guys down later and let Wagner develop and bring him up if you want. So it gives them an option, at least with some youth and some wingers there.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. We talked about this before. Murray had also mentioned that we're going to see some players going up and down the 5 freeway, Eddie. There's going to be guys getting moved around a lot now that the goals are so close. I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot more of the prospects show up for a few games at Honda Center.
Yeah, but also there's a lot of established NHL players on this roster in front of them, and it's going to be hard for any of them to break into the lineup. And I'd like to see most of them stay and play a full season in the AHL, unless they're the management believes they're fully ready to play, and and they can bump out a guy like Stewart or Sekach or even Jackman or Wagner, maybe Freiberg or, like you mentioned, Cardillis or Nason. If those guys are really ready, then I would say give them a chance. But if they're on the edge, I think a full season in the AHL wouldn't hurt them.
Yeah, and I think that's a big benefit, is having those guys close by and having them down there playing in the games and getting more experience. It's just going to be nothing but good things that's going to help out the Ducks. Other team news going on lately. We saw the Ducks released an article about the scoreboard coming up. You see the framing is now up, and it's in that rectangular shape as we had reported, where the screens are going to be a little bit bigger, facing the penalty box and the benches. They said that the square footage, I believe, was 3 or 4 times bigger than the old one, so that's going to be a welcome sight. That's going to debut on September 25th when the Ducks play the Kings in a preseason game. I plan to be there for that one, which is going to be good. Also, the Gulls and the Reign are going to play earlier in the month on September 5th, I believe is the correct date. There was free tickets that they gave away. I think they're all gone now, but they had them out there for people to buy. So that's kind of what's coming up in the next month in terms of hockey and whatnot. The other news that's come out, and it's kind of been an issue, has been the Ducks' third jersey. So far, it looks like Reebok and the Ducks don't want to talk about it, and they're not confirming what Iceletics has put out as the jersey. So,
Sorry to interrupt. One thing real fast.
yeah.
It's October 5th, not September 5th.
Oh, my bad. You're right. October 5th. I knew it was the 5th. Trying to remember the date. But in terms of the jersey, the jersey's come out, and we're trying to figure out what's going on with this situation. And I don't really have an answer yet. We're going to have a poll question up about what people think. But what do you think, Eddie? If the jersey's what Iceletics put out, do you like it? Do you think that it should be changed, or what are your thoughts on the jersey?
You're gonna get grilled later for getting that date wrong. But
Oh, yeah.
but no, I think we mentioned this before, and we were saying that from what we've heard, and we're not trying to come out and saying that we know exactly what's going on, and just from the people that we've talked and we've heard, it's not the exact jersey, and that's not trying to discredit aesthetics or anything. I know they're if you I don't know much about jersey blogs out there, but from what I've heard, they're one of the top ones, and they've gotten a couple things right over the years with jerseys, but from what we've heard, it's not the exact jersey. Some things could be similar, and I guess we'll have to wait until October 16th to actually see. But I like the design that they showed. I'd like to see it a little bit different than that. So, but I still want to be surprised. So I hope it's not the one, because I really want to see a kind of a different design, and I want to be surprised by the one that they debut on the 16th of October.
Yeah, exactly. I think I have the same feeling. What do you think, Thomas, too, about the jersey, the one that you saw? Did you like it? What are your thoughts on it?
I'm a sucker for all things nostalgia, so I would be perfectly fine bringing back the Mighty Ducks symbol in some fashion. I really like that with the current jerseys on the shoulder patch. I thought that was a great touch. Personally, I wouldn't actually mind just bringing the original jerseys back like they did a couple years ago against Ottawa for that one game. I thought that was a really cool experience, and I would love to see them do that a few more times in the future. As regards to the one we saw, I like the Disney logo. I like the orange, and I know they're going to, I'm almost positive they will put orange in it because of the Orange County connection. So since that's not the jersey, presumably, if it's something similar to that, I'll be pretty happy with it.
And Alex, any other thoughts on that jersey that's been floating out there all over the place?
I like their design for it. One thing I find interesting is it's a pretty good correlation of all the Ducks jerseys that they've had with the exception of like a few, like the Wild Wing third one. I mean, you have the vintage logo there. You got the orange, like the Stadium Series, and then if you look at the way the sleeves are and the way the bottom is with the stripes, it's kind of a throwback to the like 2009 one or the 2008 one before they went to the when the current home jerseys were the third jerseys. So I liked it. It's a pretty good mix.
Yeah, and it seems like what everybody's saying out there is that they seem to say that it's going to be something similar to that. So that's what I've been hearing from everybody else, and we'll just kind of have to monitor the situation. We'll put out the fan poll. I'll either have it out later today or sometime this week, and let people decide. But that's what it's kind of been in the past, is that they'll put out an idea, and sometimes it's not exact, but it's pretty close. So I'm just happy that if it's mainly orange, I was bugging the people at the Ducks marketing department this last season about, please, do orange, because, in the playoffs, we were trying to get everybody to wear the Stadium Series jerseys and get that orange feeling going, because when we played other teams, you would see, Calgary would have all the red, and Winnipeg had the white, Vancouver had the blue. You'd see that, but it's difficult because not everybody bought the Stadium Series jerseys, and that was only a one-time event basically. So if they do go with that kind of a theme, it would be perfect, especially come playoff time, Eddie.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously the orange isn't the primary color, so we can't. But you don't really want to say paint it black and do the paint it white thing. Orange is the symbol color of the Ducks. I mean, we're one of the only teams to actually use orange in their jerseys, so I think having it painted orange is perfect, and then having an actual jersey that you can buy all season long, and people are able to prepare and be ready for the playoffs, so we can actually present something similar to the whiteout at Winnipeg. I don't know if it'll be exactly the same. They did an amazing job during the playoffs when they had that going, but if we can get majority of the fans wearing orange. I think that would look pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that's the consensus among most people. The only other real news that's going on around in the NHL right now, and actually is the real big news, is the Patrick Kane situation. Obviously, the EA Sports decided to take the photo of him and Jonathan Toews and change it, and now it's just Jonathan Toews holding up the Stanley Cup. Even though this is still an ongoing investigation, basically, and we're not exactly sure if he's going to be charged at all, or if it's a sexual assault or a rape type situation. But what do you think, Thomas, about this situation as far as it's the way it's going to unfold and impact the Blackhawks next season?
I think it's going to all depend upon whether or not he's charged. I think if he's charged and it goes to trial, I think it's going to be like the Voynov situation where he's suspended indefinitely until the situation is resolved. However, I think until charges are filed, he's probably going to remain with the team. He'll start out in training camp and preseason, unless files are charged within the next month or so. And then going forward, it's all going to depend upon what happens at if there's a trial, if there's a settlement, or if nothing happens. One thing I have noticed going around the internet, I do follow a few different Blackhawk blogs, both via Twitter and other websites, and there's been a few that I've seen where they say that Kane is a fantastic, great player, but some of them are just tired of his shenanigans. Regardless of the sexual assault, he's known as a party boy who likes to go out and just do stupid things, and some of them are wondering if Hawks management is just starting to get sick and tired of it, and if maybe it's time to cut ties with him, not just because of this one situation, even if nothing happened, but just because of him going out and making a fool of himself several times over the years.
Yeah, and that's a problem. You see that happens with certain players on certain teams, and they steer clear. We've talked about the Kings, and there are a couple situations that are going on too. Alex, what do you think as far as the Kane situation in Chicago?
I gotta agree with Thomas. It all depends on whether or not he's charged. But if he is charged, I do not like the Hawks' chances next season. I mean, that's a huge, significant part of the cap. The cap penalty still with Voynov. I mean, you really saw how that hurt the Kings. And Voynov is nowhere near the player Patrick Kane is. So, I mean, their roster is already pretty decimated as is, especially with the moves they made. I mean, yeah, they brought in Anisimov, but I mean, there's a couple questionable acquisitions there. But yeah, if Kane's gone, it's a big blow to their any hope that they really have, in my opinion, of even being a playoff team, especially in the tough West.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be very tough for them to either A, make the playoffs, or B, squeak in and do anything in the playoffs. Granted, if things go a certain way. What do you think, Eddie, as far as Kane and what's going on?
Yeah, and I have to agree with them too. I mean, if he gets charged, it'll be interesting to see how the Blackhawks approach the situation. I know you see this obviously with the Voynov and in other sports. You see football players getting suspensions as well in the NFL, and it'd be a big blow to the Blackhawks in any way, even if he's not gone for the whole season. I'm missing him in it for any amount of the season is going to be detrimental to them. I mean, I know he missed most of the second half of the season for the Blackhawks, and they had some guys step up, but they weren't the same until he came back. But and with regards to what Thomas said, with the team might be getting fed up, management might be getting fed up with the shenanigans. We saw a lot a closely similar situation in Boston when Tyler Seguin was there, and they were kind of fed up with his attitude off the ice, and they ended up dealing him away to Dallas. And a lot of people will see that as a bad trade, and I kind of tend to agree. I think he was a great player, and it's tough to move him, but I think they were just sick of his his off ice behavior, and there could be a similar situation in Chicago, but it's hard to let a guy of that quality go.
Yeah, and this is just going to be a problem for Chicago until this gets resolved. It's just going to be a big headache. You see everybody's talking about it right now. It's really, especially in August with not a lot of hockey news going on, it's dominating a lot of the news out there. So we'll just have to kind of play it by ear and see what happens, and see if charges are filed and whether or not he's innocent or not. We don't know. I mean, he's the one that knows. But we'll keep you up to date on that situation as well. In terms of what's coming up this month, August 29th will be the Fedoran Cup. It's the event to raise cancer awareness. Ryan Getzloff will be there. Phil Hewitt's going to be there, as we talked about on the show before. Eddie and I will as well. It's a good event to go to. Hopefully, if you haven't already, you can go online and buy the tickets on their website. I'm not sure if it's sold out yet or not, but that's the first glimpse of hockey we're going to have coming up. And then we'll see the preseason games in September coming up. And as Thomas had said, October 5th, you will see the Gulls and the Ontario Reign play at Honda Center for one game, which will be a great event. That's really going to do it for this week. We'll get you all caught up on everything and hopefully have more for you next week. All right, and thanks for listening. See you next time.